Great. Welcome, everybody. I have to say this is the first time Sarah and I are doing a call like this, but we recently created a mad, crazy, big-ass goal and shared it with everybody. And at the end of it, we thought, wouldn't it be great to share some lessons from writing our book in 5 days? So we just thought we would do that. We're going to tell you what we believe worked, what we believe didn't work, so that you can also hopefully transpose that into your writing process and writing journey. So welcome, everybody. We're just getting chatted. If you're not muted, please mute yourselves. And so we're going to kick off. We've got 10 lessons that we've sort of put them together. So Sarah, I think the first one needs to be started by yourself, unless you think we should do a quick introduction.
Yeah, so let me introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Bullen. I'm a writing coach and I'm a literary agent. And I work with writers most often to get them to write their books. But this time, we put our money where our mouth was and wrote our book. Just a little confession, and Kate will introduce herself too, is that we have between us written quite a few books. I've written around 8 books, 4 of my own, and then I'm also a professional ghostwriter. So I do have a little bit more maybe possibly experience in writing than most people. So I will tell you a little bit about that later. Kate?
So I have written 3 books. The book Sarah and I wrote was our 4th. I've also written, I think to date, 10 online courses that I've been selling probably for the last 12 years as a coach. So also just a lot of writing and a lot of discipline of writing under my belt. But we really wanted to walk our talk and put our money where our mouth was and do this. So I want to do a little disclaimer off the top, which is we had a little bit of this process done last year, but it was by no means our book. But we started off with kind of a proposal and a couple of outlines of structure. But Sarah, our first lesson, so let's just kick into that. Our first lesson is structure is your solution. So what was that lesson all about?
Well, this is something I always talk about with writers, and I'm extremely strict about that. And I'm always say you don't start your book until you have your structure, be it your plot list, be it your scene list. And really, I think that this was really what got me certainly to the end. And, I think this how that worked was we knew we wanted to write a book about how to write a book, because that's the kind of concept of how do you write a book. And Kate and I really tackled it in a very logical way. And I may even share my screen because we decided to do it on an Excel spreadsheet. We literally went, how are we going to structure this book? And on the most obvious level, all books are structured in terms of a table of contents. The table of the contents is really our guiding light when we write. So Kate and I were kind of toing and froing about what should the table of contents be. So before we wrote a single word, I think what we did that really set the whole book up in the right way was we decided to put in a very logical way, how should we walk a reader down this path? What is the most logical and the most interesting way in which a reader could read this book, and what would just make sense? And I think that is so important, is to provide the easiest option. I think initially we did come up with some creative ways to deliver the information to the reader. We kind of thought, well, what if we start there and then we jump there and then we throw them a little bone about that? And I think between the two of us, we just went back to a simple solution, which is just be sensible, be logical. What needs to happen next? Okay, now they've walked that path. Now they've done this. What next? And really that's the basis of plotting we used. And it's the basis of all plotting. It really is, in a novel, in any book goes, what could now happen next, and what would actually be the best for the reader?
Can I just add something in there? Because in terms of it's what worked for us and what didn't work for us, I'm not an Excel spreadsheet person. I have to do them to keep tabs on writers and keep tabs of our finances. But I find it quite hard for my creative brain to work with an Excel spreadsheet. So I really had to push myself, because I will normally use pieces of paper. I will normally use Post-it notes. I'll use a wall. I'll write on a mirror. So I almost had to, I kind of put myself into what works for Sarah. And it was really interesting for me to go outside of my comfort zone, because I could feel my little resistance kicking in. And it was amazing because it was really easy then to move stuff around, which is maybe what we'll come to later. So we had a great Excel spreadsheet. And also just to remind some of you, or if you don't know that yet, the whole time we were doing this over the 5 days, we made a series, I think, of 7 live videos. And if you didn't catch all of them, or if you caught some of them, I've actually posted them all on my website, which is kate-emerson.com. Under my videos, you'll see it'll say day 1, video 1, day 1, video 2, where we actually highlight and we show you our Excel spreadsheet and what we're doing. So that can accompany this tonight. So that's our first lesson. Structure is your solution. Number 2, our next lesson was you always need a big idea. How did that unfold, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think, all writers start with this concept, which we certainly did, of let's write a book about writing a book. Okay, that's fabulous. And I think what for me was very important was that it had some kind of uniqueness to it. So Kate and I grabbed a whole load of books about how to write a book, because I have loads of them. I reference them all the time. And we took them and we looked at kind of what they were saying. And the truth be told, our book is not radically different from anybody else's book. The body of theory is the body of theory, and there's only so many ways you can skin a cat. But we really knew that we wanted to bring our own personality to the book. I think maybe that was our big idea. Our big idea was personality. And I think the big idea we actually came up with was something that came together in our title. So when we first put this book proposal out there, we called it 9.5 weeks.
Do you remember that movie? So how to write a book in 9.5 weeks.
Movie reference, and what is that about?
So bad.
Anyway, so that big idea was a big idea. But then when we sat down and we did this commitment to spend these 5 days writing a book, we looked through what we had. We looked at other people's books, and we looked at the existing material we had out in the world, and we both saw the one course that we offer, which is called Write a Book in 100 Days. And we both thought, now that sounds good. Now that sounds good. So the big idea we brought to play was write a book in 100 days. And it's so interesting because structure is often a byproduct of the big idea, because the second we had our write a book in 100 days concept, we also got our structure right. And we realized that the structure, our table of contents, had to be a series of tasks to lead the writer through the 100 days. And it could be anything, let's say it was a diet, but we're writing a diet book. And it could have been, reshape your body in 100 days, which that's actually the basis of most diet books. 30 days to your best body, 90 days to your best body, detox your body in 3 weeks, anyway, what it may be. And that's what a big idea is. It's attaching a concept, something that readers can hold on to and work with.
So Sarah, I just want to jump in here, because what we did was, so I arrived in Cape Town from Joburg on a Monday lunchtime. Sarah picked me up, or whatever, how we did it, and we spent the afternoon kind of just getting all our stuff out the way. And when we got together Tuesday morning, that was what we considered day 1. What we did was we made some coffee, of course, and we actually then we were chatting about this big idea. So we were itching to jump in, but we knew we actually had to go up a step and back a step and we spent like an hour and a half actually just talking over this big idea, because it then sits like a beautiful umbrella and it frames absolutely everything. So it's almost like we had to stop ourselves jumping in, so that we could get the absolute clarity of what is the big idea, because then everything had to fill in behind that big idea. Otherwise, we were wasting our time and energy, and of course, the 5 days. So when we say 5 days, we really had to keep it tight and clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was our big idea. Our next one, number 3, is, how did I write it down? Narrow your audience equals clarity of writing. That was our lesson number 3.
Maybe let's just talk, Kate, about some of the other, maybe one of your ones now, because you had a lot of about setting yourself up, and I think that's
Okay, so let me say that all writers need magical ritual. So what we also did before we even did our big idea, yes, a good call, Sarah. Before we even did our big idea is we sat at Sarah's dining table and we set our intention. So this is before we started chatting about our big idea. We sat down and said, how long do we have? We've got 5 days together. Okay. I was also staying in Sarah's house. We knew we had that time carved out. We said, what's our intention for this time together? We then pulled cards, so some tarot cards, some goddess cards, some animal cards, especially in Africa, beautiful wildlife coming into it. We also then lit a candle, and we really were very mindful, and we both wrote out what is our intention. So that also became a way of marking the beginning and knowing where we had to get to by the end, but bringing a little dose of like magic, ritual, sacredness, a little bit of the spirituality side, because that's really important to both of us. And it stopped us when we got a little bit crazy, drank too much coffee. So it really set us up right, but it was from the intentional heart space. And I think, for me anyway, I can speak for myself, that really worked. There was nothing about that didn't work. I think maybe the only thing was that maybe we didn't do that enough every single day. Like we did it really powerfully at the beginning, and we did elements of it absolutely going through, but we possibly could have done that a little more mindfully every day, like topping and tailing every day. So that would be maybe that's what didn't work. It wasn't enough for me. What about for you, Sarah?
Well, and I just think ritual as a writer is such an important thing, and it's something that almost signifies that you're sitting down now and you're writing, and it's different to emailing, and it's different to anything else you do. It's creating that sacred space. And we all have our own ways. I mean, for me, always it's the cup of coffee, and then I have a few little things I like to do. I shut down all my other packages. I shut down my email, my WhatsApp, my Facebooks. I shut it down. And that's my kind of writing ritual. And even that said, it still takes me, both of us, a while to settle into the writing zone, as I like to call it. So I do believe in that, and like signifying I'm stepping into my role as writer now. Light the incense, ring the bell, whatever.
So I think actually that goes on to, so now I'm jumping around because we had 10, but we'll go through all 10, is that actually goes straight to the next lesson, which is about how do you manage life when you're writing. So one of the things that we did was let's take you back to over a year ago. We had carved out some time in Johannesburg where we had both sat together. We had tried then, some of you might know, in Tulbagh, where Sarah was running a retreat. I joined the retreat. We tried to carve out time. It wasn't appropriate because Sarah was actually immersed in looking after writers. So I was busy working on a new online course. Then we said, okay, let's stop the bullshit because we are conning ourselves and let's carve out this time. But what we had to do was manage life. So the day I arrived, we had Greek potentials coming in. We had Spain potentials coming in. We were trying to organize a cruise and Italy and all this stuff, and Sarah's kids to feed and lifts to do, and just stuff was going on because we weren't at a hotel. We still had life to do like most of you do. So most of us don't go into this little vacuum when we write. We absolutely have to manage life when we are writing. We don't get this sort of sacred time away where there is nothing else. And even if there is that, you still have to manage your energy, your food, all of that. So I think that was really important in terms of how did we do that. So for example, I remember one day, so what worked is when I'm in Cape Town, I have a lot of friends, like one of my best friends lives in Cape Town, and when, it's such a lovely place, it's so beautiful, you want to go and have drinks on the beach and Camps Bay, and I had to be absolutely vigilant. This is for me personally because I don't live in Cape Town, and one friend wanted me to go there for dinner and drinks, and I was like, no, one drink. So it was one drink. They were like, no, stay for dinner, stay for dinner. I'm like, no, I need to get home. I need to get into bed. I need to rest. I need to be clear for tomorrow. So literally in the 5 days, I allowed myself that one drink out. And I could feel it because it completely shifted energy. It was fine at the end of the process for me. So that really worked, just saying no, 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 no to everybody else other than Sarah and Kate and her children in our house. Okay, managing that. That felt manageable enough. Managing other people outside of that did not. So I was very single-minded, and I just had to say to people, I'm not here for socializing. So that bit worked in terms of managing life. The other thing that really worked was that we were in the same house, and I know Sarah's home, and it's a very beautiful creative space, beautiful views. So that really worked for me. That's from my side. What didn't work for you, Sarah, in terms of managing life?
I think what did really work was actually the agreement you and I had up front that we only had 5 days, because what that allowed me to do was just go, everything else has got to wait. It was quite radical for me to do because I'm a multitasker. I don't like to focus. Kate is exceptionally focused, I have to tell you up front. She's a very focused person. I've got a few things going on all the time. I've got phone calls. I'm managing this. I'm paying people. So this was an exceptionally difficult thing for me to do. But the commitment we made together that, and I think that pulled me through, saying no to this, no to coffee, no to drinks, no to a walk, no to swim in the sea. No, I'm not going to do this. No, I'm not going to do that. And I don't think there was anything really that didn't work. It was actually it was totally fine, and the world waited.
So let me tell you what didn't wait. So if you saw our live videos, so I think it was on morning one, we've just done our first live video. We've got our coffee cups were somehow magically coordinated with our outfits, which was absolutely not planned. We both go and sit. We had computers side by side at that time, because that's interesting, writing with two voices into one book. And instantly I hear clang, clang, clink, clink, clong, and Sarah is cooking flipping fried eggs. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? And it's literally every now and then I had to manage our joint writing life. I go, hey, like, come back here, get your butt back here. I think it was then on day 4, sitting down, and I've just jumped in, and I look over and she's painting her nails. And it's like, if you watch the videos, it's almost like you think she's done it just for the videos. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? And it's just so funny that you have to manage all those little things that are around you. And I think one of the key takeaways for me from all of this time is that we also had a lot of fun. So that was about managing life. Okay, Sarah, let's go back to the next one, which was narrowing the audience down and how that helps clarity of writing. This is actually the first one we're giving you, I think.
That was so important. Like, at some point, we looked at each other in all the crazy creative ideas. Should we do this? Should we do that? And I said to Kate, let's just focus. Who is our reader? Let's just go back to this again, because we want to share this, we want that, but we need to go back to who is going to be reading this book. And we had to be very specific, because our reader, for example, is not just a writer, but it's a writer of non-fiction or memoir. So our book's not for people writing a novel. It's really for a very, very particular audience. And that became incredibly important, because we started to talk to them more directly. We started to use, the second person. You want to write, you may be thinking this, have you ever wondered that? So it really pushed us to engage with our reader. And it's so important. Often I push writers to be more generalists. So, all publishers love a commercial fiction, which means as many readers as humanly possible. But this was not that kind of book. We are not trying to appeal to everybody. It was a very particular book in which we want to share with our writers, people who've worked with us, people internationally who want to buy some of our stuff. So we knew our audience. And that was, I think, one of the doors opening in terms of that. And it got our tone right.
And for me too, that absolutely worked. Like, there was nothing that didn't work about that lesson. And in fact, in the book, sometimes we just had to delineate and say, if you're a memoir writer, do this. If you're a nonfiction writer, do that. Yes, Sarah? Are we good? I think Sarah's just frozen. Okay. So I think let's move on, because that one was an easy one. Number 6 is don't let the dust settle.
Excuse me, I have to move because my internet connection is very unstable, as they are telling me.
Do you want to maybe take your video off, or you'll just give us a tour of your lovely Heart Bay house?
I can have a chandelier behind me.
Okay, so don't let the dust settle.
Yeah. So, I actually learned this last year in Greece, is if you put your book down, it is very hard to pick it up again. I learned this in Greece writing a novel, a paranormal romance. I got so immersed, I was so excited. I wrote 25,000, 30,000 words, and then life got in the way. And about 8 months later, I picked the book up again, and I had no idea what on earth my book was about. And I actually had to start from scratch. So I think that happened to us in this process. When we did our initial burst in Joburg, we got maybe 10,000 words down. And when we reconnected again this year, we literally had to go, sorry, what was this book about? And it is really the lesson. And the more and more I work with writers, the more and more I say that, don't wait. It's like, if you tell me you've been writing a book over 6 years, it's got, you don't have the fire. The fire's not in the book. There's something in the creative process. It's like when you put a porcelain in a kiln, like, it must be intense. So I think we created that.
Yeah. So I think we also, I think what happens for me as well is if you let the dust settle, so literally, the dust gathers on the manuscript, is I think what happened for me is I felt like we'd conned ourselves that we had done our book, because we'd done the proposal and then we thought, what are we going to do with it? And then we thought, it would be nice. And we let life get in the way. But sitting there, we've gone, well, we've done most of it. So we had a little kick of energy of going, well, we've kind of done some of our book, but we hadn't. So it almost, you get delusional to think that you've done something when actually you haven't. And I think that was why we almost went to the flip side and said, we have got to do this and we've got to commit publicly to doing it, because it takes so much energy to get back in. And you're thinking, what was I? You can't get back into that same frame as easily, which is why some of the phrases I always say are, you've got to dive in and you've got to immerse and then you've got to get out. And we absolutely waited too long. And I think that's a disservice that we did to ourselves in our book. So it's why we went a little bit manic at the other end. So try and look at that for yourselves, is that if you've got to a certain point, of course you can put your manuscript down for a little while, but give it a cutoff date. So maybe when you finished your first draft, you're giving it a little bit of a gap because that's appropriate, but try not leave it in your bottom drawer somewhere for a year. It's not healthy for you or your book. Okay, next one, Sarah, is flow doesn't just happen by itself.
Oh, yes, I love this lesson. Flow does not just happen by itself. You look at those great books and you think, oh, they read so nicely. It's so simple. I can just follow all the rules. I can just, it makes so much sense. Kate and I really did learn this, that did not happen until we made it happen. And when we read our kind of first draft, we had this sort of rough dummy sort of thing we put together. We read it and we were both like, good grief, this does not make any sense at all. And then it became the process of, how do we make this work? And that is very important in a book, that it flows, that it's easy, that like there's a sense of logic. So our idea of logic, which was our structure, which was our table of contents, doesn't always translate when you've put the words and you've filled the spaces. So we populated our table of contents with what we had. And then when we looked at that, we realized that there was another level to make it work logically and logistically and nicely, just nicely. Yeah.
I think one of the things at the beginning, we thought about the 100 days that we were going to be very specific, as do this on day 1, on this on day 2, and this on day 3. And actually, when we started looking at it, the flow, we actually thought that was a little bit contrived. So we almost took that layer out and let it be more organic. But we had to almost let go of that concept, because on our Excel spreadsheet, we were like, where do they need to be? Like those of you who've done our mentorship, where do you need to be and by when? And actually, we found that hindered the flow. So it was quite interesting. We had to learn that and let go, because it no longer worked when we were immersed in it and looking at what is the right flow for this book.
It's always so interesting for me when people bring out second or third editions of a book, because often that's where you really resolve flow. Like, especially like workbooks like your Martha Beck's, whatever. By the third edition, they've really, really finessed the flow. But all books need to find the flow before you send them off for editing.
And that was the other thing for me, is with that Excel spreadsheet, because at one point what happened was I was sitting with the Excel spreadsheet. Sarah is a much faster typer than me, and she was doing more of the clickety-clack on the keys, but it was quite easy then to just cut and paste and move things around. And I actually have to say that I kind of fell in love with the Excel spreadsheet to help with the flow. So that was really interesting for me.
Excuse me, I'm moving again.
We're going to see kids soon. Like they're going to go flying past the back. Okay, so our next one is move on, move on.
This, of all the lessons I think I learned from Kate during this writing process was that move on, move on. And she just kept driving the process forward. So all of you know on the mentorships how I push you, like, don't look back, keep going forward. But now imagine we've condensed that into 5 days. So very quickly we assembled our first draft, and then we had the next draft. And what Kate is incredibly good at doing was holding us to the deadline. And that meant there was only so much attention we could give particular things at any given moment. And that meant sometimes, don't worry about the detail. That's not important right now. We'll come back to that, or we'll leave that to an editor. Or what can we do next? How do we keep moving this process forward?
So for me, that was about my big stick comes out, because if you don't do that, it's like in everything, it's like in coaching, there is content where we can get stuck on the story, and there's process. So for us, in order to do this, we had to very much stay engaged with the process, like what's going to get us from A to B to actually complete this process. The content is the nitty-gritty. When you're a business owner, it's the difference between working on your business and in your business. And when you're in, so yes, we were immersed in the writing process, but if you got too detailed about, should we use the word and, or should we use the word or, you know what I mean, like that level of detail, we wouldn't have got beyond chapter 1 in 5 days. And then we would have needed 5 months or 5 years. So it's kind of knowing those two different layers. And I am great with a big stick. And it was like, okay, we need to get back. Okay, do we need coffee? Yes. What are we going to do? Let's move on. And it was always, let's move on, let's move on. And it's just instinctive in me to just keep, because I knew I was the one getting in the Uber and going on the plane and leaving for Joburg and leaving for where I am currently in the UK and next week in Greece. So I had that pace kind of built into me because I knew how little time that we had. And it was amazing that we not skimmed, but we just kept pace and speed, because that's also quite energizing. You know what I mean? Because if you get too stuck in, it's beautiful to get immersed in writing when that is appropriate. But for how we were doing this, that was not appropriate. We needed to stay quite light, quite elevated, quite kind of on the process side, not as much on the content. And yeah, it was like, okay, that's an editor job. Can we ask the editor to do that? Oh, let's ask it. Do you know what I mean? So not fobbing everything off, but just going, what do we need to stay focused on in order to do this? Okay, so this...
it sometimes even entails just making a note, like for the editor, please check the use of first person versus third person. Please check this, make that consistent. I mean, that's actually the level of which we had to...
I remember at one point, I think both our brains needed a little change of pace. And there was one section where we were using books as examples. And we both, like, it was almost like we both just fell into it at the same time, where it was quite nice for us to go to the bookshelf and pull some examples and look for them and transcribe them, or do some Google. It was almost just like, but it wasn't for long. It was for about 40 minutes where we had a complete change of pace, because actually it was a little more detached from our book. And I think it gave our brains a little bit of detachment and removed us so that we could just get back to it. So that was quite interesting that happened naturally for both of us. And I can remember that as a very specific time where we both just grooved into that. And then we're like, okay, that was cool. We're done. What's next? So it was always, how we done? How we ticked? Is that part of the Excel spreadsheet done in the terms of tables of content? What's next? Okay, what's our next one? We've only got 2 left, Sarah. So number 9 was all about the move often, write faster. So this was about energy.
So important. Yeah. And that really was about the fact that when you are sitting stationary on your bottom for 8 hours, something goes a little bit funny in your head. And what we found was the only thing that broke a cycle of just like a loop we got into was exercise. And I don't know if we did it enough.
We definitely didn't. So what we did do was we did something significant every day. So if sometimes Sarah would go to, because I was slotting into her life. So Sarah would maybe go to a yoga class. I'm not part of that gym. So I would then match when she went to yoga and I would walk up the mountain. And maybe some of you saw some live videos. And we would do, say, an hour's exercise at the same time, because obviously then we want as much common bum time at the same time together to write our book. But what we did do that worked is we would say, okay, we're going to work. She would look at the classes and say, okay, we're going to work until 1 fast and furiously, and then we're going to the 1:15. So then I knew, put my jacket on, 1:15, I'm going up the mountain. So we did that what I think didn't work is that we still sat for too long. And I think that's the pro and con. We both have the commitment. We had the deadline, we had the intention. So it was quite easy for us to immerse and sit for longer periods. And we had double energy that we could feed off. But I do absolutely think we sat for too long. And part of that flip side for me was then we drank too much coffee. So every time you see us on a video, we've got a cup of coffee.
And not enough wine. I feel that would have really made it all work better.
Okay, so Sarah's lying because Sarah is not much of a drinker, but actually every night we did. So that was also something we ended. When we said, okay, are we done? And we saved the document and we put pen down, then it was like, okay, and we poured ourselves a drink, and then we did not talk about the book anymore. So either the one night I went for that hour social, but mostly actually we would put on the TV or go to bed. You mean we didn't kind of have to do stuff together. I think it's also interesting for me because when I've written other books, I often have different energy levels. I can often write at night. This time by sort of 5 o'clock we were done. I think there was one evening I managed to push through till 7:30, and those last 2.5 hours were amazing, but it was one of the 5 nights. So not enough exercise, too much coffee, maybe not enough water. And I think it is much more powerful to get up more often. But we did do silly little things in the kitchen, like silly little dance moves while the kettle was boiling.
And I will tell you honestly that when Kate got on the plane, I locked the door, I went face forward onto the couch, and I think I slept for 12 hours. I was exhausted. We had depleted all of our creative energy. I mean, in fact, I think I was in bed the whole of the next day.
You spent Sunday. I left Saturday. You spent Sunday in bed. So I think one of the things is what happens is it takes a lot of adrenaline. So your you know what I mean, the chemicals that you are generating when you're on that kind of a buzz. Plus, remember that we didn't even put that in as well. It is actually the last bit, but we were also interacting a little bit with our writing community because we were posting live videos and stuff. So that also is a little bit of an adrenaline buzz. And then, of course, like blood sugar, it had a little bit of a low. I think I also ate a lot more sugar than I normally do because there's kids in the house, so there's always chocolates and sweets and cakes and that kind of stuff. I think for me, if ever Sarah and I had to do this again, I think it would probably be better for us to go away. So like, mom-in-law can look after kids for the week or something. So or somebody else was maybe cooking for us. So as much as it's lovely to cook and it can be quite a nice, disconnect from the book and doing something creative, I also think that we probably didn't eat enough of the right food at the right time because that also fuels your brain. So I think, we did it, that's fine. We're trying to like elicit some lessons from it. So I think that we could have done that a whole lot better, but we did the best that we could given the circumstances that we were under.
Yes.
Okay, so number 10. Did you want to say something?
I wanted to add another lesson. Maybe we'll call it 11. But
okay, so let's do 10 first. So 10 is kind of everything that we've been speaking about, which is have a crazy, mad-ass goal. Okay, so we hadn't got it right the first year. We're like, how do we go big? How much time can we carve out? How ridiculous can we be? Can we really just make it so silly that we can do this? So that was the thing. We made it big. We made it public. Okay, so we started off and we said, this is what we're doing and we're going to keep you posted. I think there was only on day 2, I think we didn't make a video. And then on the beginning of day 3 or one of the days, we were just so exhausted we've been writing that we kind of didn't have the energy and we forgot to. But because social media, if you use it in the right way, like ego kicks in. And I mean that in a positive way, because your pride is at stake. Because here we are, this is what we do. This is what we help you guys do. And now we're doing it. So we also couldn't stuff around and we didn't want to not complete it. So I think that was something that really worked for us. We made it ridiculously big. We made it crazy and people saying, you're going to do what? And we made it public. So that added for me a little bit of compelling reason to get Sarah away from the eggs, and say, come, we're doing this thing.
Yeah, and I think you've covered, actually, Kate, not just the important point of having this big, crazy goal. And there was also just absolutely no option of us not reaching it. Like we were going to write until we were done. And even if our being done meant it wasn't as perfect as we would have liked, we had to get to the end. And I think that is so hard for writers, because there can be just endless better versions. You know, we could have sat for 4 more weeks and we would have come up with maybe something that was worse, maybe something that was better. But you have to get to the end and let go. And I will say that we have let go. And as we speak, it is already with an editor being edited and a cover designed, because that's how we roll.
Because what was, in fact, we were thinking that week, like, well, who's going to edit it? Because we absolutely knew that Sarah couldn't, I couldn't. You know, we've said this before, your eyes can only pass over your own work so many times. And also we needed that fresh perspective. And in fact, we've already got that we need to reply to an amazing idea for the book that Sarah and I haven't even chatted about because we've been busy today. But we needed that completely fresh perspective, because someone would look at Sarah and go, well, of course, Sarah can edit our book. No, we can't. We were the ones in it, okay? We were the ones on the ride. I was just thinking about one of the things, I wanted to say something about a crazy big idea. Is so often, you know, it can take you 100 days to write a book. It can take you 4 months, but often it's just those last few days where if you're really committed and you're in and you know that you're going to reach your goal, is absolutely like you can type faster, you can think faster, like everything just hones in. And what happens is, I also believe that the bigger the goal, I think it's Jack Canfield says, it takes no more energy to have a big goal than it does to have a small goal. But what happens is, if it's a bit bigger, there's almost like this universal energy that also kicks in, that pulls you forward. It's like this magnetic effect kicks in, because it's like everything is kind of willing you towards it. You know what I mean? It's like, well, what have you got to lose? And you just run towards this crazy place, because why not? I think one of the things I just remembered that didn't work for me was the Saturday morning. That was the last day. 3:30, I knew I had to walk out the door and get in an Uber, okay? Was that it was the Two Oceans. So for those of you listening in from around the world, that is a big road race that happens in Cape Town, and most of Cape Town gets shut. We're in a little community village called Hout Bay, and on the last day we know that we need the printed version because your eyes read it differently, and we wanted to do one final read through with the printed version with Sarah making changes on the computer, and we really stuffed that up. So Sarah says, oh, I'm just going to send it off to the printers. So we did that, I think, on Friday night, so that we'll go Saturday morning. We knew we were going to go for a lovely walk. I went up Camps Bay for the 4th time or something, not Camps Bay, whatever the mountain is. Sarah went to her CrossFit class, and then we go to the printer, and they were closed because, first of all, it was Easter weekend, and second of all, it was the Two Oceans Marathon. So we definitely had not put any valuable input into the pre-planning of how we were going to get our manuscript. And then I just knew that my eyes could not do this again on the computer. So we know that the printer's closed. Then Sarah says, oh, but there's another printer. Let's pop there. So now we pop there. And of course, now we're all sweaty from exercising. I've got us beautiful coffee. We're drinking coffee, sweating, and we're now thinking, how do we get our manuscript? We go to the second one. That one has moved, Postnet. So now we're thinking, what are we going to do? And Sarah thinks, oh, well, actually, now I think I'm just going to do the shopping because I'm having a big Greek Easter lunch tomorrow. So why don't we just go to Pick and Pay, go shopping? And then somehow Sarah said, there's a Kodak print shop. So we divided and conquered. Sarah went to go and do lamb and chocolate eggs, and I went to Kodak, and I walked and I said, please tell me you guys can save our lives. And this big grin came back, and this guy said, what do you need? And I said, do you print? He said, of course we print. And I said, but do you bind? He said, of course I bind. And I started doing my little jiggy in the shop, because when we had our printed copy, we wasted 2 hours, but that got us through the last day. It completely changed our energy, but we wasted kind of 2 hours in that process of getting the manuscript. That's what I wanted to say didn't work for me. How about you, Sarah?
Well, all I can say that I didn't realize how fast you could do a grocery shop until Kate Emerson supported me in a grocery shop. And I was the till so fast. So I think, and I don't know if we're going to take questions, but I think just to sort of wrap up what we've been chatting about so quickly, for 45 minutes have passed, was we're not going to suggest you write your book in 5 days. The reason we could do it was we were pulling together a lot of written material, courses, and and but that is available to so many of you. So many of you have possibly got blogs and this and that you've written. And I think what was really important about this was the process. I think we proved to ourselves that it was doable. My last book took 6 months to write. And I did a very similar process at the end where I flew my mom up, I locked the doors, I had a little bit of a mild nervous breakdown. And that had been a 6-month process. This was a 5-day process, which I think is pretty radical. And I also have to say, in my closing, is that actually the book is pretty darn good.
There was her sales pitch. Look at that, just snuck in at the end. Oh gosh, so I'm just looking. We had said we would keep this call to 45 minutes. We have, I promise you, I think one of the biggest things for me was we made a big goal, we committed, we love each other dearly, as you know, and we just had so much fun as well. We were finished at the end, but we had fun. So I think that's the biggest takeaway for me, is always commit, but always keep it light. Okay, because we can start taking it all far too darn seriously, and I don't think that's good for any of us. So whether you are writing your first draft, or whether, because I see some of the writers on here are at a different phase, you're pitching to publishers, or you are chatting to literary agents, but there's always just like, keep it light, keep it energized, keep it a little frivolous when you need to. Like, don't get so stuck in on the stuff. It's not serious. It's not normally life or death, but you need to have the commitment as if it is. But I think you need that dose of humor, and that dose of craziness will always stand you in good stead. Sarah, I'm saying, because it's now 45 minutes, so we can say that, like, officially that is what we wanted to share, our 10 lessons. You did say you thought you had an 11th. Did that one just dissipate?
That was get to the end.
Get to the end. That's the moral of the story.
Because if we had both said to each other, okay, we're not there, let's just re-meet in 6 months. No.
Yeah, because we know we're next seeing each other in Greece, but Greece is, we have a retreat and a residency, and there's not time and energy in place for that, because we also know we've got 18 nights of writers. There's no space for us to be doing our work. We are there to hold writers doing your work. So yeah, it was non-negotiable for us. So I'm thinking that we say, like, that's over, and if anybody wants to go, you can just say adios and wave. But if we do get into questions, it might become a whole different scenario. So let's just see if there are any specific questions about what we have shared.
And all of those, we say goodbye, jump off the call, and maybe 2 minutes of questions if there is, Kate. I've got a problem with my internet connection.
Okay, so there isn't an immediate one, so look at that. So then we just say, maybe, because we'd never actually really intended to take questions, it was just a sharing. So thank you for coming and spending the time with us. And yeah, lovely to see you all and see some names on our screens that we know, some that we don't know. So we hope it's been useful, and we hope, most importantly, that it helps you take care of your writing, of your book, a whole lot better and a whole lot easier. Good night, everybody.